All right. Well, welcome to the Empower Your English Learners podcast. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, change agents. And today we have with us an amazing educator who is going to be sharing some thoughts that she has about some of the things she's learned along the way as she's been a teacher, a central office administrator, a school-based administrator, a staff developer. And so just want it's a pleasure to have you here today, Jennifer Kraft. And we just want to learn from you. So can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you're about.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. You know how passionate I am about our multilingual learners. And so I'm very excited to be here and talk about how we can ensure that they are getting what they need to be successful in schools. So I have been in education for 26 years. 19 of those years were directly in school, teaching students in some capacity. And then the last about 7 years, I've been at the district level. So currently I am in a large suburban district where I'm the director of English language arts from pre-K to 12. And so that encompasses curriculum, instruction, assessment, professional development, and ensuring that students have what they need. It's the one class that all students have to take from kindergarten through 12th grade for graduation. And so making sure that all our students have what they need so that they can graduate college and career ready, which a huge emphasis, of course, is making sure that students have the literacy skills that they need to then unlock whatever it is their post-secondary opportunities are for them. And so I'm also currently at Johns Hopkins. I'm in my last year of my doctorate, and my dissertation is around the graduation rate of English language learners.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you again for being here with us today. I know we have a lot to learn from you as we kind of talk through some of your experiences and what you've done, some of the work you've done at the school level and then also at the district level. So that being said, I know that you've been a teacher and you've had multiple roles as a teacher. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things you've learned as you've worked with diverse learners and English learners? And I know if there's another term I know they'll probably hear us talk about is multilingual learners. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there too.
Absolutely. So, through my work, I have developed some core beliefs that I think are so important when working with diverse learners and our English language learners. And so, one of my bedrock ones that I've developed over the years. And so we always say learning is our core purpose. And so the core beliefs I'm about to talk about is, well, how do we make that learning happen? And so my very core bedrock belief is about belonging and inclusion. And so it's so important to make sure that all students feel like they belong in the classroom, in the school, that they are part of the community. And so we know that from research, that when students' cultures are devalued or rejected, that it ultimately impacts the learning experience of the students. And so I always say, are we ensuring that all students feel like they belong? Another core belief I have is around rigor. I always believed in high expectations as a teacher. However, it really hit home when I had an opportunity to bring back some students that had graduated from one of my districts and had gone on to a local college. And they came back and talked to a group of teacher leaders. And so they talked about how they were not ready for college, that they had not been prepared. And as several of the students said, they gave us easy work because they thought we couldn't do it. And I think that will always stick in my mind about what opportunities are we putting in front of students. And ultimately, I think that sometimes teachers think that they're helping students by being nice and giving them easier work, but they're actually limiting their future opportunities. And so rigor is so important for me to think about. What do we need to do to make sure that every single student has access to a rigorous curriculum? And I know that then we'll need to talk about what scaffolding is needed, but we never take away the rigorous curriculum, grade level content from students.
Mhm.
Another one is around relationships. And so really understanding that you need to know your students, that you need to develop a relationship. It's very hard to then make things, well, my next one is relevance. It's hard to make things relevant if you don't know who your students are. And so really understanding understanding who your students are, who's sitting in your classroom, the connections that you can make with them, so that they are there and they engage in the learning. So my next one that I touched on is relevance. So just really thinking about why is it what we're learning? Why is this important? Why is this important for me? Why is it important in the sequence of instruction? So as we start to think about spiraling standards and different things, understanding the continuity of where it goes in and why it's important. And so those are really, I guess, what I would say are my foundational core beliefs about how do we make sure learning happens for all students.
And I love that focus on rigor, relationships, and relevance. Those three R's make such a big difference, right? As you were talking about rigor and some of the things that you heard students say, the fact that teachers gave them easy work or didn't give them access to that high level work, that grade level content that they deserve to have access to. It's such a huge thing. And I've noticed the same thing as I've worked in various districts with different teachers and also had the opportunity to sit and talk with students and, and sometimes as a central office administrator. And that is something that I've heard come through time and time again, the fact that why is my teacher giving me easy work?
Mm-hmm.
When they do that, it just limits what they're able to do outside when they go beyond our walls of that schoolhouse, right?
Absolutely.
When they're trying to get into a career, those limitations really hold them back. Love what you also said about relevance, as well as relationships, and that's really so important. I know that from lots of conversations with counselors and in past episodes we had talked about that whole doing that root cause analysis and collaboration and how important that is. And I know that the work of our counselors and making sure that we give them access and we're understanding where they're coming from is so important.
Absolutely.
Right. So that being said, I just wanted to kind of go on. I know that you've had some experience with literacy. You've had a lot of experience in that area. You've also worked with English learners in a variety of capacities, different grade levels. So just wanted to kind of ask you, based on your experiences, what have you noticed at different levels, like the younger English learner and some considerations, the older English learner? So just kind of framing it from that perspective for our listeners.
Sure. So I'm going to start with, because I think it helps center us, that multilingual learners are the fastest growing student population in the United States currently, and that it's estimated by 2025 that 1 in 4 of our students will be an English language learner. So when you start thinking about 25% of our students are going to be English language learners. And then let me add another piece. We already know that we're underserving that student group. It becomes really important to really try to figure this out, because 2025 is only 4 years from now, which is crazy to me, right? So what is it that we can learn and do in the next 4 years so that we know that we can serve all English language learners well, regardless of what school or school district that they're in, that they all are going on to graduate, that they all have whatever post-secondary opportunities they have for them. So it's interesting when you say, what have I noticed between younger and older students? And what I would say is that, first of all, although I know it's an umbrella term, English language learners, our Ls are multilingual, that they're a very diverse group of students. So we do categorize them in that way, but then just to recognize that each student has a unique identity and how some of our students are English language learners were born in the United States. Others are coming to us where they have interrupted or no education, right? Like we have a very wide variety. But there are some things that I would say that we could look at that would help all of our students. And I'm going to start with that. First, we have to recognize their cultural, social, and linguistic strengths that multilingual learners bring to the classroom. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 or you're 15 or you're 18 about to graduate. That's the very first thing. So before we talk about anything else that I think will help younger or older students be successful, we have to recognize what they bring to the classroom. Their funds of knowledge is important, and we have to recognize that. And so when we start to think about that, their linguistic strength, that they are going to be bilingual, trilingual. I mean, some of our students have multiple languages. That is crucial to understand. They're not coming to us with a deficit. They're coming to us with an asset, and that has to be recognized. So for both younger and older students, I would say that there are some things that I think are really um, pivotal. And when we start to think about designing instruction and we think about universal design for learning, that's where we really start, right? Like we don't want to be retrofitting curriculum. I mean, sometimes we have to, and it's necessary in the lessons. But from the very beginning, when we design our lesson, whether you're a curriculum writer or you're a teacher in the classroom, you should be thinking about how do I make this lesson accessible for all? So the things that I'm about to say that will be good for our younger and our older English language learners, guess what? They're good for a lot of our learners, right? And so some of the things that I think are really important for teachers to keep in mind are visuals. So thinking about what do I need to accompany this lesson with to help unpack that. And the visuals could be lots of different things. You could even show a brief video, but really helping to understand, to access the content, what is it that you can pair it with? As a teacher, what can you model? So if you're asking them to get ready to do a think, pair, share, or to have an academic conversation, what can you model for the students so that they understand what those expectations are? And so really doing those think alouds for students, or partnering with a student in the class and modeling a conversation before you have students do that, again, benefits all students. um,
Absolutely.
Vocabulary instruction. So, you talked about my area of literacy. So, I can't ever get too far away from literacy, but vocabulary instruction is crucial. And it's really funny because when you first said younger and older students, word walls popped into my head. But guess what? They're not just for kindergarten students. I have seen them used in biology classes and algebra classes, and they are powerful. I actually had an opportunity to talk to some students that were in algebra, and they were implementing word walls for the first time. And they were like, and they said, I use that all the time. It helps me so much. They said, I know where to look on the wall even now because that's where they're hanging, right? And so thinking about, word walls. Some teachers don't do word walls. They might have students do individual glossaries. But the idea is that you have some core vocabulary that's important. And if it's important enough for it to be core vocabulary, how are you making sure students know it and they can access it? We are so lucky to have technology now. Like I think about when I first started teaching, um, students did not have their own Chromebooks or laptops or anything, right? But now
Like
I
everyone
think,
has them now.
no, absolutely not. So I'm thinking about, Google Translate. There's lots of things you
Yeah.
have to remember as L1 and or their native language moving to English, that you use their native language as a strength, right? Like that's not a limitation, that's an asset, right?
Correct.
Um, Providing sentence or paragraph frames
Mm.
to help students. Now, gradually, obviously, we fade those out, but in the beginning, those are so helpful to get that academic language that you want. And then always, always, always with all of your students, but particularly English language learners, you want to create an environment where it's okay to make mistakes and to take risks. And
That's
so as a teacher, you can model that. I would tell my kids mistakes all the time. And sometimes I would just make them on purpose. So I'd be like, oh, I spelled that wrong, but I see it now. I'm going to fix it. So glad that I caught that. And so, really understanding that learning is a process and it's messy.
mm.
So we used to do my favorite mistake, and we would look at different student work, and I love this mistake because the first time I did it like this myself.
Mhm.
And allowing students the freedom to really feel like I can try and it's okay to not be right the first time.
Right, right. Um, well said. And I know that you made a comment, I think, earlier about the different kinds of word walls. And in this virtual environment, I've also loved to see those vocabulary dictionaries that
Yes,
will
I
create
love them.
Google Docs on there, so they have one for themselves. And in some cases, they're even able to share it with a friend.
Yes,
They can share
yes,
ideas. It's just so amazing when we take some of those concepts that are in the classroom,
yes.
we kind of transform them into this new virtual remote learning format, right?
And I mean, you just hit on another area that I think is super important, which is collaboration. So when you talked about having that vocabulary journal online, I can now share this with everybody. It can be a collaborative effort, right? And so the more opportunities we give students to collaborate, or to try things out before I just cold call them, letting them talk to a partner first, is really important. And so the more opportunities, like less teacher talk, more student talk,
Absolutely.
and giving them that time to feel secure before I would ask them to speak in front of the whole class.
Absolutely. Now, I know that in your work, Jennifer, you've worked at the school level, you've worked at the district level, right? So I know you've actually been kind of working both as a teacher, but also kind of coaching teachers, right? So
Mhm.
in the work that you've done around supporting those diverse learners and English learners, multilingual learners, I know different people have different terms. What are some things that you've learned that can really help our listeners at the school level and then at the district level? Just so those think abouts to really make sure we're engaging and we're making sure that our learners have the opportunities to learn is being maximized, right? So,
Yeah. So I am a huge proponent of professional development when it's done well. And
mm,
so I have to throw out a number for you because I think that is as our, we have district leaders listening. Um, 49 hours. 49 hours of professional development is when you will actually see results in student achievement, which sounds like a lot, right?
mm,
And so a lot of times it's the soup du jour, right? So this week we're going to do something on literacy, and next week we're going to do something on L's, and the week after we're going to do something on special ed, and so you're getting an hour of this, an hour of this, an hour of this. But what I would venture to say is that if you make a concentrated professional development plan that's going to hit that 49 hours, which is not all stand and deliver professional development, that's embedded job coaching, and working with peers, all kinds of things that, again, the things that you do for English language learners, multilingual learners, are going to benefit all students.
mhm.
And so when you start to think about these embedded strategies that will help all students, it's worth it to spend the time to actually work through all year, creating environments for students. And so we talked through several strategies earlier. And one thing that we also, haven't touched on, but the idea of understanding standards. And although we've had, the standards around for a while, we still have various degrees of familiarity with standards in schools and districts. And so it's very hard to teach to standard if you don't know what the standard is. And so some of the professional development that I've seen that's been particularly impactful is unpacking the standards, and then also coming back, and after you've taught whatever that standard is in a lesson, coming back and looking at student work together.
Right.
So when you ask me if what some of the most impactful professional development is, it's really that collaboration PLC time of teachers working together and saying, what are we looking for? What's the criteria for success? So if we're both teaching the same content, Sandra, so if we're both in a school and we're teaching English 10,
Mm,
um, that we have come together and said, we've looked at this assignment, and this is what we think that students need to do to meet it. And then we're going to come back and look at student work together. And
exactly.
even more powerful, we're going to grade it. We might trade papers. You might grade my kids and I might grade yours, because we're that comfortable that we've taught it. We've said what the criteria are, and we're not, that we could actually grade each other's papers. And it's that conversation that you're having about, well, why do you think that this is, if you're using a rubric, why do you think this is a 4 instead of a 3?
Mm, mhm.
That is key, because until we have that consistent idea of what success is for a standard, for a lesson, for a test and an assignment, we will continue to create uneven learning opportunities for students. And so that is really, really powerful. So yes, there is time to stand and deliver professional development, but a bulk of your time should be allowing those PLCs to collaborate and doing job embedded coaching through the PLCs, through peers going and visiting each other's classrooms, through those types of opportunities.
Yeah, I love how you define professional learning because you really, as I'm kind of like just reiterating what you're saying, it's not just about the standing in front and doing the session and the teacher sitting and listening, but it's about taking it and
Mm,
actually embedding it into their practice, right?
yes.
So I love that what you said about the peer to peer, going in and observing each other, really understanding what's happening, what's working, what's not working, the whole feedback structure that goes along with that. That's so powerful. And that being said, Jennifer, it made me think a little bit about equity. I know that's something that's a term we throw around a lot. We say that we want equity for our English learners and diverse learners. But can you just kind of talk a little bit more about what does it mean and how does it relate back to that professional development work and the leadership work that's happening in schools?
So equity is such a loaded word. I love the word equity. I'm going to tell you in a minute about how I keep it hanging on my computer, but people throw it around a lot. And people have lots of different definitions. And there's so many equity PDs and equity webinars and equity books. And really at the end of the day, we have to understand that equity means, if I'm just going to boil it down, everybody gets what they need.
Yes.
And so that's heavy. I mean, I just said it really like it sounded simple, like everybody gets what they need. When you really think about it, though, that is a tall order. And right now, most students that are multilingual learners are not getting what they need.
That's right.
So here's what happens is we have to think about when we say equity and we say, oh, but I am giving everybody what they need, then there are performance markers that you need to look at.
Right.
And so there's lots of ways you can look at it. And I'm not going to just say, I mean, yes, look at your SAT scores. Yes, look at your state scores. And yes, look at your graduation rates. And look at your GPAs. But also look at who's sitting in what classes. Look at who has what opportunities.
That's right.
Those are the things that are going to really tell you, are you hitting your mark with equity? Is every student in your school, is every student in your classroom, is every student in your district getting what they need to be successful? And until we're there, then we're not being equitable. And so I keep it's actually in my my meeting notebook, and it's also on my computer, and it says, equity doesn't happen by accident. Equity has to be intentional. It's not just going to happen because you think you're being fair, or you think how you did it last semester seemed fair and you're going to do it. Equity means you have to be intentional to say, I'm going to look at these 25 kids in my classroom and saying, are they all getting what they need?
Exactly.
And if they're not, I'm going to do something different.
So that is so powerful, and it's so important that it's about how do we operationalize equity, make it come alive for every single kid that's sitting in the classroom. So that being said, I wanted to just kind of broaden that same lens to the district level.
Okay.
So we know that we want it to happen in the classroom, but what does equity really look like? And what are some of those caveats and challenges that, and really, I think sometimes it's really just those areas to be careful in when we think about equity and what it really means for all schools.
So, such a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because I think that there's a lot of work to be done at the district level around equity. And so some people have embarked on equity audits, and there you can obviously read more about that, or I certainly can come back a different time and talk about those more. But what I would but what I would say is, where is the district spending their money? Where, how are students being scheduled? Who goes to what school? Where, when you start looking at some of these questions at the district level, then you have to really say, if you're spending twice as much on your magnet programs as you are programs for your multilingual learners, that tells you something, right?
That's right.
If you look at how staffing occurs, and you see staffing in other areas 2 or 3 times the size of your English language learners, but then you're looking at that 10% of them are passing the state exams, and 60% of them are graduating. You have to say, do we have we staffed correctly, right? So it's a combination of human resources and economic resources to really say, are we being equitable? Again, not equal, okay? Because equal is not equitable. Equitable means everyone gets what they need.
That's right.
Some of our students not only have what they need, but then they have extras, right?
right.
And then some of our students don't even have close to what they need to be successful. And so you have to really take a long, hard look at that. I can talk a little bit, I know we just have a few more minutes, but we're currently doing an equity audit in our English language arts, and we're looking at our curriculum
Okay.
and saying, who's included in this curriculum. And what we know, and I'm not speaking about our curriculum particularly, but this is just across the United States, is
Right.
that the curriculum is Eurocentric, it's male dominated, it's Western, it's very heteronormative,
Right.
and leaves out a lot of students. Well, when
Exactly.
students don't see themselves reflected, again, we go back to, remember we started the whole podcast with rigor and relevance and identity, right? Like when they don't see themselves in the curriculum, that causes lots of issues. First of all, we can talk about engagement. We can talk about then how I feel about my academic identity, how I even feel about doing this work, right?
Right.
And one of our students said in a student panel, it was a 12th grader, and she said that this was the first year that she had read a book with a Latino in it.
Mm.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so we recognize that's a problem. As soon as I heard that, I said, all right, we're going to take a look at the entire curriculum, and we're going to say, is this an inclusive curriculum for all? And if not, when our audit results come back after we finished, if not, what are we going to do about it?
That's exactly right. Well, Jen, I think we've hit on a couple of great things today. We've talked about rigor, relevance, relationships, and equity. And I believe that all of these things need to be on the forefront of the work that we're doing if we really want to make a difference for our English learners. So before we leave, where can folks find you online?
Oh, wow. So do you want an email, or what would you like?
Yeah, whatever way. I mean, it could be a website.
I am on Twitter,
Okay.
which I do put lots of great resources out on there. So that would be a great place to start. So it's Jen L. Craft. So it's JenLCraft, is my handle. And so that's a great way to connect. And you can also just direct message me if you would like to connect and talk more. But I do tweet out lots of great resources, and particularly focused on diverse and multilingual learners. So I would love to connect with you. Please feel free to reach out to me, and we could connect.
Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you, everyone. And as we've always say at the end of most of our podcasts, be the change that you want to see in the world.